President's motley crew, and we're going to try to put on a little presentation for you. As usual, I ask if anybody get a notice that wants a notice by email or any other way, or anybody who didn't who wants one, please let one of us with a badge on know, and we'll get you on the list. Second, first of all, please turn it down. Turn it down. If you've got to turn it off or down to vibrate. And third, if anybody needs hearing assistance, we have them available in the back. I see some of you have them. Is everybody okay? I probably need it more than most of you. And again, before we get going, I'd like to let you know that in our midst tonight is a student from Arizona State University who is doing a summer project, and her project is pretty ambitious. She's tracking the activities of some young person who has a passion for something or other, was her assignment. And I don't know how, but she picked our friend Dylan to be her subject, so she'll be here. There she is on her knees, videotaping. Her name is Gia, and she'll be taping Dylan and his interaction, if any, with some of our World War II vets, because his passion is learning about World War II. Isn't that refreshing? Do we have any other juniors in the house? I heard there was a possibility of somebody's grandson coming. I see a young man back there. How old are you?
I'm only 7.
You're only 7. Well, welcome. And who's that? Is that your sister with you?
Yeah, 2.
She's what?
I have 2 sisters.
Oh, 2 sisters. Okay. Well, I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll enjoy this, and I hope you'll come back for more, because there's a lot to learn. Okay, so back to things as usual. We don't have our flag here. Here we are, Central Pennsylvania, World War II Round Table. Dylan, you did it so well last time. Would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance again? Come on up.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dylan.
Not a problem.
As some of you, most of you know, and the newcomers need to know, we have several World War II veterans who regularly appear with us every month. Would you raise your hands and be recognized by those who don't live it? That's a bunch tonight. I think we've outdone ourselves. Charlie, did you get a head count of how many there were? Okay, well, there's 20, look like 20 to 25. That's terrific. Dylan, you got your work cut out. If Dylan comes up and talks to you, please give him a few words, will you? Because it's his passion and it's a good one.
Yeah, Mommy.
As I usually do, I like to say what happened on, this is June. I'll tell you what happened a little bit in June, and you'll hear a little bit more later on from our guest. On June 4th, 1944, the Allied troops liberated Rome. That enabled them to use their 8th Air Force and others to reach Eastern Germany, targets Eastern Germany for the first time. That's really big stuff, because they did a lot of stuff. And as you heard a few months ago, the fellow that wrote about the 8th Air Force, they really took a beating, but they really did a job. And of course, tomorrow, June 6th, when the British and US troops successfully landed on the Normandy beaches of France. On June 5th, or on June 6th, the order of the day from, you'll recognize this, he said, and I'll read this: soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade, towards which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms of other fronts, You will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. No more powerful words were spoken. He said, your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since Nazi triumphs of 1940 and 41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage and devotion to duty and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. Signed, Dwight David Eisenhower. Pretty tough message. And so, as you know, on June 6th, off they went to Normandy. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, which we'll hear more about this evening, on June 1st, the U.S. began submarine warfare against the Japanese shipping. On June 11th, the USS Hornet launched raids on Tinian and Saipan. You might hear a little bit about that. On 15-16 June, she blasted enemy airfields at Iwo Jima and Chichijima to prevent air attacks. And I don't want to take much of your speech away from it, but let me tell you something. You read a little bit about, go to anywhere on the internet and read about the Hornet. You know that this gentleman did some good time in the service. The enemy approached the American carriers in 4 massive waves full of young and inexperienced pilots. Fighter aircraft from the Hornet and other U.S. carriers with veterans pilots' skills were honed to perfection, broke up and savaged all the attacks before the Japanese aerial raiders reached the task force. Nearly every Japanese aircraft was shot down in the great air battles of 19 June that became commonly known as the Marianas Turkey Shoot. As the Japanese mobile fleet fled in defeat on June 20, the carriers launched long-range air strikes that sank Japanese aircraft, the aircraft Hyo, and so damaged the 2 tankers that they were abandoned and scuttled. Their Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's own flagship. His log said that his surviving carrier air power is only 35% operational out of the 430 planes with which he had commenced the Battle of the Philippines. So you know that this ship participated heavily in the Battle of the Philippines, which enabled on June 15th the Americans to land on Saipan, and by the 21st they had advanced to New Georgia and the Solomon Islands. Heavy duty stuff. Closer to home, remember we do have a website. It's a little obscure, you got to look for it, www.centralpa2, the numeral 2, roundtable.org, in which we will be publishing more and more things as they happen, particularly the future speakers, more on the past speakers, and things of general interest. In July, we have a man named Dick Brown, local guy from Homestown, who is an Iwo Jima survivor. That ought to be in as well. For the rest of the year, we have several things booked. We're good into August. B-24 and B-29 mechanic. September, B-29 command pilot, pending his health, which is, we just hope it's going to be okay. And there's other possible speakers. These will all be into the website so you can follow our progress there. Let's see, somebody else gave me something here. Oh, the Vietnam War Roundtable is next Thursday night on June 12th. The first Mariner and Marine Recon, Bob Gump May. Somebody recognized that name as the coach, I think it was of the Hershey High School football team, and other notable achievements that he had. You can look them up at their website, Central PA Vietnam Roundtable, all one word.com, and they'll have information on that. There's more sheets in the back about that activity. So, that about wraps up my announcements for the day. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our speaker of the evening. Tell you a little bit about him. You probably read about it, but he was on the USS Hornet, and you're with me here. Stewart Robinson, who's from Palmyra, served aboard the Hornet, and the second carrier to carry that name, but he's the 8th Hornet in the U.S. Naval Fleet. The first one goes back to the 1700s. And the previous one was the Hornet that launched Doolittle, that they had to scuttle and sink after heavy attack. After a shakedown cruise, they went through the Panama Canal and onto the South Pacific, where they patrolled off Hollandia, and their planes bombed in the Wake Islands and Saipan areas, clearing the way for General MacArthur's island invasions. It was originally renamed the Kearsarge, but when the original Hornet, when the previous Hornet was scuttled in her honor, they named this one Hornet, CB-12. Is that? His ship earned 11 battle stars, including the Battle of the Philippine Sea and Okinawa, where it survived Japanese attacks. In the following typhoon, the Hornet lost its bow, and I'm sure we'll probably hear about that as well. Went back to the port for retire. He was discharged in 1946 and returned back to Palmyra. And we're glad to have him here tonight. Please welcome Stewart Robinson. Stu?
Of interest on the journey of the U.S. Hornet during World War II. The name Hornet is one of the most distinguished names in naval history. The War of Independence, there was a Hornet. In 1775, and during the Civil War, the Americans captured an iron sides from the Confederates, and they used it in the Civil War. The seventh Hornet, there were 6 consecutive Hornets, and the 7th Hornet was CV-8. Can everyone hear all right? Yeah. Good. Okay. The CV-8 was the ship in which it became popular with the Doolittle raid in 1942. Remember that President Franklin Roosevelt wanted something to excite the American people, and so he worked with the Navy to have the B-25 bombers take off on an aircraft carrier and bomb over Tokyo. The men who flew them bombers did not have a designated landing. They were told to land in China wherever they could find a place, and some of them had to parachute out because of their running out of fuel before they could find a place to land. The U.S. Hornet that I'm going to speak to you about tonight is USS Hornet CV-8. And I believe that it takes its place with all the other famous naval ships that are afloat. The Hornet was awarded 12 battle stars and 2 presidential citations. In 1942, I graduated from Susquehanna Township High School. There's a man who is on the board here, the Grand Susquehanna guy, Charlie Lloyd. Charlie, I think we ought to raise and give Charlie Lloyd the work that he does in the World War II. You know, the ship is like a church. The church is the people. And so the ship was the men who were stationed on that ship and doing the work, not the vessel itself. And the Hornet became World War II Hornet CV-12 became famous for the men who served aboard it. For they have a name to be, or a record to be proud of. I tried to join the Navy after I graduated from high school, and I took a test, and they said that I was colorblind, and I couldn't get in. So I went down to Olmsted Field, got a job, and I worked there till they drafted. I got a draft notice, and I went into the Navy, and they asked me what service. I said, I want to go in the Navy. No more tests for colorblind. And they said, well, you're in the Navy if you want to go in. So I went in. And I left from Harrisburg on the New York Central. How many people here remember when the New York Central used to run a passenger line from Baltimore to New York? Anyhow, you had to go to Pennsylvania Station, walk across the tracks, and you would be in the New York Central Station. And they run a regular route from Baltimore to Buffalo. But that was back in 1942. So you probably don't remember. After I was on the way to Sampson, New York, on a train, I met 2 fellows. Robert Russell Reed, he was from Schuylkill Haven, and Eddie Sherman was from Girardville. And if you know the way the Navy works, the service works, they have a roster. Well, they had 2 R's, Robinson, Reed, and 1S. So we were always right together and everything, and we got to be good friends. When we were at boot camp, Reed stepped on the stop bunch on the bottom bunch, and Sherman, he was on the next bunch beside us. And one of the rules was no talking after 8 o'clock at night. They turned the lights out to talk. And one night, we had decided that we were going to church next morning, and Reed was talking to me. He says, what church you go to? And I told him, and next thing you know, the officer in charge, he comes down, he says, the rule is no talking after the lights come. So he says, get dressed, get your shoes on, you're going to get punished. And we didn't know what was up, but we were a little afraid. And Eddie Sherman, he was on the bottom button, and he told the officer, he says, oh, they were just talking about where they went to church. He says, you mustn't be very sleepy. You get your clothes on. So the three of us get outside and they give us a rifle. Well, it wasn't a rifle. When you're in boot camp, you had a stick of wood. It looked like a rifle. And he says, you run around that quarter-mile track and hold that rifle above your head. So we go out there, we ran around. He said, you guys don't look sleepy. He said, go around again. So we ran around twice, and I'll tell you, I learned not to talk after the lights went up. But it solidified our companionship. We were really good buddies after that. And we were assigned to the Hornet for boot camp, but they weren't ready for us, and so we were in the outgoing unit stationed at Sampson until the Hornet was ready for us. And they gave us some meaningful jobs to do to keep us busy. And we took liberties every weekend. We would go up to Rochester, New York. And, I remember one time up in Rochester, we met three girls. They were going to the University of Rochester. And three beautiful young ladies. I mean, they were nice people. And so they decided that they would cook Sunday dinner for us. So Saturday night we'd go up to Rochester and stay in the YMCA, and Sunday afternoon we'd go to their house for a Sunday dinner. So one time we decided, well, we'll take these ladies out for dinner. So we took them out to dinner in this restaurant, and I never thought about how much money I had with this young lady I was with. She ordered more food than I could pay for. So I'm sitting in the restaurant. The three of them, they get up. They all go out. Here I am sitting down. Some guy next, big fella, says, I like sailors. He give me $5. I'll tell you, I was able to go along. The shock was about to run me. Anyhow, we went to Norfolk, Virginia from Sampson, and on the cattle car to New York Central. And we were assigned to different jobs. I was assigned to a plane captain. And Robert, he was in the tire repair part of the ship. And he was a pretty smart boy. He was up in the captain's office. He could do 60 minutes, or 60 words a minute on the typewriter. So, plane captain sounds like a pretty important job. But actually, you're a caddy for a plane, would be the name. Well, we were on the ship, and the guy came up to an airplane and says, now this is your airplane. Make sure you know where it's at all the time. I had no idea. I never touched an airplane before. Never that close to an airplane. And here I am looking at this airplane, big thing, and I said, I wonder if it lays eggs. I knew nothing whatsoever about it. But we went on a 14-day shakedown cruise down in the South Atlantic. And from the time we got up in the morning till we went at night, we drilled. Then they drilled, then we drilled, then they talked. And the part I didn't like about it, they didn't use very soft language when they taught you something. And I guess they expect you to never forget it. Because I learned to be a plane captain. Plane captain, his main job is when the plane lands on the flight deck and the pilot jumps out, you jump into the plane and they take you until they're ready for you for the next time. you have certain jobs on the plane where you have to keep it clean, and you warm it up in the morning, and check the bags, you check the fluids, gasoline, make sure it has gasoline and hydraulic fluid. And Robert, he was in the tire repair part. And you have to be on an aircraft carrier to realize how many planes get flat tires when they land. One of the pilots told me one time, he says, you don't land on an aircraft carrier. He says, you take that plane over the aircraft carrier and try to flop on there before the carrier moves out from under you. Aircraft carrier. And I found that out to be true. If you're not in a certain position, this landing signal officer at the end of the neck, he'll lay you off, and you have to go around, come around till you're in the right position where you can flop that airplane on the deck. I remember one plane, a guy got waved off. He was supposed to go around, and he had already cut his engine, and he got on the catwalk. His plane was half off and half like this. And we're down there trying to get this plane off, and the officer in charge, he comes out and he says, don't worry about that. He says, the plane's out there going to land. Put it in the water. So we just put it in the water. And it's surprising how many airplanes were pushed off of that middle elevator that stuck out over the water, into the water. I remember one time we got 13 Grumman Hellcats. And when they would land, they would buckle behind the pilot seat. And after one landing, they all got pushed over to the side. But when you think of the cost, don't think of it in the cost today, because them planes back in 42 only cost $50,000 a piece, where you're talking how many $100,000 for one of them planes today. But there were landing experiences unbelievable. We had to come in, nosedive in, flat tires, turn around, swivel around. So, when we were on our way from the Atlantic coast, we were going to San Diego, and we went through the Panama Canal. The reason we had to stop in San Diego is because when we went through the canal, they had to unload the ship. You could only have so much weight on there, but the ship stopped up, set up high. And we were going through the canal. I could have stepped off of the ship and walked alongside of it while it was going through the canal. That's how close the ship was. And, we were one of the last aircraft carriers to go through the Panama Canal. But it was a funny thing about it. There's a big lake that you go through, and when you're going through there, you're looking in, and it feels like you're going down the Swatara Creek. Trees and stuff on both sides, no ocean to think about. So we got to San Diego, and this was our last night before we were going overseas. And we got liberty, and we told the taxi driver we want to go to the best restaurant in San Diego. So he takes us to a restaurant. It was a restaurant, but it had booths like, and they put a curtain across, and when you got your meal, and we ordered steaks, porterhouse steaks, three of us were together, and they were the largest porterhouse steaks I ever seen. They filled the whole platter up. But then when that steak come out there, he sat there and looked at that. And I'll never forget the expression on his face. If you think back in the 30s, when he was raised, when I was raised, you know, that was a lot of meat. You never seen a porterhouse steak back in those days. They were out of their price range. Well, it must have been a wealthy person. And we were sitting there, we told Eddie, well, that's yours. And I'll remember that expression on his face yet today, because he was raised very lean like most other people who were back in the 30s, if they can remember that. Anyhow, after we leave San Diego, we go to Hawaii. We get to leave there for a couple days, and we're sent out to join a task force in the South Pacific. So we joined Task Force 38. Ships that were in our task force were the Wasp, the Ticonderoga, and the Hornet, and two battleships. One was in New Jersey, and 4 carriers and a half a dozen tin cans. Tin cans being the destroyer. The first mission that we had was sweeping the slough. If you have studied the Panama Canal or Guadalcanal, Guadalcanal, you know what the slot is. The slot is the body of water between Guadalcanal and Adrian. So when you talk about sweeping, I asked the pilot one time, I said, where are you going? He says, we're sweeping between New Guinea and Yemen. I said, what do you mean sweeping? What an aircraft? He says, well, he says, we have no designated target. He says, what we look for is anything that looks like enemy or anything that has military use. He says that's what we're going to drop our bombs on. So we covered that invasion of you'll have to excuse me, Hollandia. We were covering MacArthur's invasion of Hollandia, and that's what they were sweeping for, to cover that invasion. We were under general quarters for 2 days, and under general quarters, the chow is sat down and you're eating sandwiches at Hershey ration bars. And if you had Hershey ration bars, I'll tell you, Hershey done a good job, because I love them. We had a lot of time spent learning our trades on the it seems that we had a lot of bad luck. Planes crashing on the flight deck. Planes, like I told you, landing half off the deck. Barrier classes. If a plane does not make a perfect landing and his tail hook does not touch the barriers, he goes forward into the barrier and cable. His tail hook doesn't touch the cable. He goes forward into the barrier and it noses the plane up to stop it because there's other planes parked on the front of the ship. This was a job that was continuous all the time, moving planes forward and back. When they went to take off, they moved them back, and when they went to land, they moved forward. And there was 2 crews of plane pushers. That's all they did. And I was fortunate. The job that I had as a plane captain was one of the best jobs on the ship. When your plane was off, you were free to do what you wanted. And one of the what was that? One of the good things about it, that was one of the good things about it. One of the bad things was you were the first one to talk to the pilots when they land. And the pilot landed one day, he says, I got 2 planes today. I shot one in front of me and I looped and came back, got the one I was chasing. And I had good rapport with the pilots, and they would always tell me how the plane worked. And he said, "You've got a good plane there." And that was the F-6F. When we first went out there, we had F-4Fs. And the Japanese Zeros could battle the 4Fs. They couldn't keep up. But when we got the 6Fs, they had the horsepower that the Zeros were no longer in competition. I remember one day a pilot came in and he was standing up on the wing. "The war's over, the war's over." Everybody thought, well, he must be crazy. The war didn't even liberate the Philippines yet. And they asked him, what do you mean the war's over? He says, "That F-6F is going to win the war for us." He says, "There's not a plane that the Japs have that can compete with us." And I remember from that day on, right before the invasion of the Philippines, the Japs were battling us on even terms. But when the 6Fs came on, the war really was over because the Japanese had lost so many pilots that their ability to fly the planes did not compare to the American pilots. And from there on, we had the upper hand. After we covered the invasion of Hollandia, they landed in I'm trying to think of the name of the Marosha. Marosha in the South Philippines. We covered that invasion, and after that invasion, we were going back to a very good secret weapon. Up until that time, when we would get fuel and provisions, another ship would come up alongside of us, and we would put breaches, boy, and lines across, and we would bring the bombs over. You'd see them 1,000-pound bombs you could cross over from the other ships and all our provisions. But after the liberation of the Philippines, we had, anyhow, I want to tell you how we, did at the Battle of the Philippines. I'm going to read from the roster of the USS Hornet. It says, slugging out. At present, we're refueling and then full speed ahead to join Task Force 38, 2, 3, and 4. We were Task Force 41. We were always the lead of the task force. It says we got an SOS from that they are attacked by Japanese and cruisers, Japanese battleships and cruisers. We sent off 2 strikes against them, damaged 4 battle wagons, 3 cruisers. Our losses were 11 bombers. As far as we know, 1 bomber crew was saved. And then the next day, still battling it out with the Japs, sent off 3 strikes against them today. Up to date, on the last few days, the Japs had lost 4 carriers, 3 or 4 cruisers, and 11 men of war. There are also 50 or 20 others dead in the water. It's unbelievable the amount of shipping tonnage that the Japanese lost to the American fighter planes. I have a hard time here. Let me see what I've got. We were coming back to the island of Ulithia for rest and recreation and refuel and refreshment, and we run into a typhoon. It was one of the worst typhoons registered in the South Pacific. We were going to refuel, and we could not refuel, but we had a sufficient amount of fuel, so they asked us if we could refuel destroyers. So they brought destroyers alongside, and the ocean was so bad and so rough that they couldn't keep the refueling hoses, tank connected. So they said, we'll take them around to the fantail. There was a refueling spot on the fantail, and they couldn't even get close. And if you ever read the book Halsey's Typhoon, these destroyers were ships, victory ships, that were converted into destroyers. And they had put heavy guns and armament on them and sent them out to the Pacific. And they were top heavy. And when they lost their balance, they capsized. The 3 of them, 3 ships that capsized. There was the Hull, the Spence, and the Monahan. The Monahan lost 800 men There were some survivors, but there was very few men lost in that typhoon. I'm always thankful I was on an aircraft carrier because if you're in rough seas for a couple of days, the worst thing you get is a headache and constipation. And always had grief for them guys on them destroyers, light ships, because they really had a rough time. When we got back from the typhoon, we had a letter from not a letter, but a message from the captain that the Japanese were landing planes on Guam. And they knew that Guam was going to be reinforced since the Philippines were liberated. And they sent us out. And our planes took off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And by going out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it meant that they were going to come back in the dark because the fleet that was landing these planes on Guam was 360 miles away. And so we launched the planes, and till they got out to where the Japanese fleet was, it was after 6 o'clock in the afternoon. But Hornet, pilot of Task Force 38.1, made the first bomb hits on carriers that were, these planes were coming over. The pilots were so poor that were landing those planes, they were more like plane jockeys. They were just delivering these planes to Guam, and they had no battle experience whatsoever. That model was called the Marianas Turkey Ship. And I talked to different pilots, and they said that it was just no fun test at all. If they would land, they would shoot them up on the ground, and if they got them in the air, it was just great balls of fire. They had they had 400. They had shot down and shot up on the ground over 400 airplanes. And the dangerous part of that was the landing when they came back to the Hornet. When the planes come back, it was dark, and these pilots were not trained to land planes at night. So the commander said, "Well, we'll put lights on," and that danger of being lit up out there with all the Japanese submarines that were around was unbelievable. But a lot of the planes were running out of gas. So 14 of the planes decided to, they landed in the water and let the destroyers pick them up. And 14 landed in the water, and 14 crews were picked up by destroyers. These pilots were well trained, and they knew how to get their life raft out of their plane into the water, and they came back to the Hornet later on. The plane of mine that I was waiting for landed on another carrier, and he came back, but the plane never come back. He said they had trouble with it over there, and so I got a new F6F Hellcat M5. It was the latest model out, and when a pilot would land with that plane, they'd always congratulate and say, "This is the greatest plane that I ever flew." And Grumman was really turning out a good product at that time. After the Marietta turkey shoot, we were on our way to cover the invasion of Guam. We covered the invasion of Guam, and then we went out on the Indian Ocean, and we bombed over at Hong Kong and Formosa to give security for the people that had invaded the Philippines, so that we were protecting their backside. And we then went north toward Chichijima. My one plane captain friend and we were up on a plane one day, and I was putting hydraulic fluid into the plane. And he looks at me and he says, "You hear an airplane?" I said, "Yeah, now that you mention it, I did see it." And I went low in the water out about, boy, we could see an airplane coming. I could hear it then. And just then, general quarters went off. And here we saw a guy running across the flight deck to his battle station. And we thought he stumbled. But this jack plane, when he got to the edge of the ship, he started strafing. And this fella didn't stumble. He had got hit by one of the bullets from the airplane. We found out that the fellow was Eddie Sherman, one of my buddies, and I had been on the plane with him. But we had his, first I want to tell you the circumstances of the possibility. Eddie always told us fellas, he says, "I'm never going to go off this ship alive." And we had sort of made fun of him, said, "Well, hey, nobody knows that." But here, he had to come down 2 ladders and run across the flight deck and get hit by a straight bullet. Only he would have came down the ladder slower or something, or not left. But the circumstances was that where these planes came from, the Japanese had been alerted to the fleet by a merchant ship. And so over at Kyushu, they decided to send 5 planes with 1,000-pound bombs up to get the Hornet. The distance that they had to go was going to be a lack of fuel possibility. 4 of them planes ran out of fuel before they got to the Hornet, because the Hornet was moving away from them they didn't calculate their mileage correctly, and one plane got through. He had to drop his bomb and fly low in the water so that he could make it to the ship. And he got one strafe, and then he was shot down by destroyers that were in the task force. So you see, unbelievable possibilities exist. Let me see what I have. So now we're on bombing Iwo Jima. We're sending 3 strikes a day on Iwo Jima, and we were to cover the invasion. They predicted that they would take Iwo Jima in a week because it wasn't a very large island. The way it was bombed, they figured everything would be devastated. There'd be nothing left. And there was land-based bombers, now based on Saipan, and they were bombing Iwo Jima, but they had a hard time because of the clouds over top Iwo Jima. And they called the Hornet and their men. And the land-based bombers that were effective gave way to the Hornet dive bombers. Them dive bombers, they love clouds. They would put belly tanks full of napalm on the fighter planes. And the fighter plane one would go around and call the the fire, and then they would go in and drop these napalm gas tanks on the openings to the caves that they were holed up in. And that way, they finally were able to secure Iwo Jima. But one of the pilots told me one time, he says, you know, we play games up there in the area. He says, we take one guy and he'll go swoop down and they'll get the anti-aircraft guns to shoot after him. He says, and we, 4 or 5 of us, we come in, he says, and we strafe him and we take them out. That's the kind of games that they like to play up there. We had a lot of time spent on training, and one time on the Hornet we were having so much trouble. We got an air group on there that the pilots were not too good. And they would get a lot of wave offs, and they would come in with too much speed to go into the barriers. It was a time when the crew and the men were not too happy. We were out there about a year before we had any chance for R&R. So they figured, well, we need a new captain. So everybody got together and they started complaining about the captain. What happened? The ship's doors used to be only open 2 hours on Sunday afternoon. So the men started complaining, and we got a new captain. And he said, well, in combat you don't have regulations. We no longer have to wear our hats. And if you know what a Navy hat is, it never sits on your hat anyhow. It's always moving around when you move. And we had the band started playing orchestra music, and we had happy hours where we would have amateur hours, people singing. And we had one guy, he used to sing like a woman. If you close your eyes, you swear there was a woman singing. It was really good. We had comedians, and started to have a pretty happy ship because this new captain, he was not a gung-ho man. It was he replaced the first captain he had. The ship stores was open 2 hours every night. You could go down and get ice cream and sodas, cigarettes, and my plane landed one day. We were under general quarters. We were the plane, the anti-aircraft fire guns were all fired on the enemy. If when you see Hershey fireworks and you know that they'll land at the end, they send all them things up at one time, a lot of smoke in the air. Well, that's the way it is when all the anti-aircraft guns are firing. And my plane was out, and the general quarters, when they were firing, and he was getting shot up, and he had quite a few bullet holes in him. And so they called a 1-easy. They made the plane, the anti-aircraft fire gun stop till my plane landed. And he came in and landed well, and when he jumped out and I jumped in, and he told me he said, I've been praying for a half hour. He said, I thought I had too many holes in this plane. And he was all right. And the plane being down, I go like this, and they say, well, we'll take it down on the hangar deck, put it on the elevator, and put it on the hangar deck. So when I went down to the hangar deck, I got out of the plane, I was standing on the wing, and the guns started firing again, general quarters. Now they were all shooting. And I looked out the curtains on the hangar deck were up, and here was a Jap plane. I saw a flash. And when the sun hit, he got the torpedo, the sun hit the torpedo. He didn't take off the front. He kept coming right toward where I was looking. And our guns were firing, shooting at him. And when he came down, he landed right at the end of the aircraft carrier, like that, underneath the catwalk. And I was there standing and watching it. I couldn't move, I couldn't walk, I wasn't moving. I figured, he's coming, I know he was running. And I got out of there. But we then went to cover the invasion of Okinawa. Okinawa was a flat island with a big mountain in the back. And we had bombed that thing for at least 2 weeks with 1,000-pound bombs. And they were having a lot of casualties. And they, I asked a pilot one day, I says, going over there every day, bombs open out. He says, they must be dumped down in the mountains. He says, I don't see how anyone could be alive on there anymore. But the Japanese were determined that they were not going to give up. And they were sending the kamikazes over. In other words, a pilot of the plane was a human bomb. And they sent 300 in one day. And we got 2 of them. And the Hornet, known as a lucky ship. When the one came down, he was shot and he just hit the flight deck and rolled over. And the other one was on the 40 millimeter gun tub that stuck out over the water. And he hit that outside of the gun tub, and from the concussion and the gasoline and stuff that from the plane flight, there was 5 Marines in there that died from that kamikaze. They on the ship, you know, the captain, he has orderlies. He has Marines, and every place the captain goes, they take he has a Marine with a sidearm for protection. I don't know. I never seen any reason for it. They were the captain's orderlies that died in that gun tub and did very little or no damage to the Hornet. I don't know how long this is supposed to go. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, my health is not very good, and I'm just about finished with it. So I'd like to read something here before I quit, before I finish. Who can forget those exciting and frightening events? How about the anxious moments while waiting for possible attacks from Japanese carrier aircraft, land-based aircraft, or the dreaded kamikazes? Through it all, CV-12 was known to become known as a lucky ship. But those of us who were a part of this ship, air group, we began to feel something more. Of course, we were lucky. No one could survive combat without it. But each of us, from the admiral to the lowest seaman aboard, all knew there was something more to a Hornet than luck. Oh, thank you for listening. Sorry. Stay on a ship overnight if they're on vacation in San Jose, California.
Have you gone?
No,
Would you?
yeah. I go to the reunions. We have a reunion every year. I went to the reunion. I haven't been out to.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you.